All right, thanks everyone for coming. My name is Tyler DeBruin, and I'm going to be giving a presentation on using GIS for erosion control inspections. I work with the town of Grand Chute as their GIS utility analyst. So first and foremost, who here has actually conducted an erosion control inspection? Got one, two. So there's going to be a little bit of information about how to actually conduct an erosion control inspection so people understand what you're actually going to be looking for before we dive into the GIS side of things. So we're going to go through the basics of erosion control inspections, the requirements to perform one, activist groups and different helpful materials so that when you're out in the field, you're not just going in blind. ArcGIS Online applications that you can use, field maps that you can use out in the field to do the actual inspections, a Survey 123 field collection form that you can use as well, some automated reports and report requirements so you don't have to physically email or contact general contractors every single time. It just does it automatically like that. A live demo that I hope works, and implementation and next steps. So first, we're going to cover the non-GIS side of things, and we're going to go through what an erosion control inspection is. So this is the long form that the DNR gives you that is required to do a erosion control inspection. You don't have to do this exact form. It just has to meet the same requirements that are on here. And just to sum it up, because I don't want to dive into every nitty-gritty detail about this form, but the top half is basically just going through who you are, where you're doing the inspection, and what the current weather conditions are. And then on the bottom half and the back page, this is where it's going to get into the questions that I'm going to go over that's required to perform your erosion control inspection. So our first question on here is going to be, is the erosion control plan accessible to the operator? So this is what a typical erosion control plan looks like. You're going to show where you're going to have stockpiling, where the building's going to be located, if there's any sensitive areas like wetlands, a creek, different things like that. So it should be accessible to the operators. If it's not, the action required is to provide an on-site copy. Generally speaking, if you're talking to an excavator, they're not going to have that on hand, so you might need to bring a copy of it from when it was approved. The second part is going to be, is the permit certificate posted where visible? This is another one of those things that they should have their building permit or whatever work they're doing permit posted where it's easily visible so that you know that the work is actually allowed to be happening. We've had many times where we've gone out and all of a sudden we're just going around doing our erosion control inspections and we notice someone starts to bring in a bunch of fill into an area that happens to be a wetland and they don't have a permit. So this is one of the most important things to have at a construction site. And if they don't have it, you just have to tell them to post a certificate. The next question is going to be, is the current phase of construction on sequence with the site-specific erosion and sediment control plan? And this is specific for ponds and ditches. So if you have an area that has excessive runoff and you do have a pond nearby, you might have something that looks like this. And this pond is definitely not being stabilized correctly. Different actions that may be required are going to be to add sediment control, install missing or ditch pipes basically so they can not run over the crest of the pond, or to stabilize the bare soil. And in this case, more often than not, you'll see something like this where it's got some stone that stabilizes the bank so it doesn't erode into the pond. The fourth question that you're required to answer is if all your BMP controls are installed properly. So this is actually a picture I took when I was out in the field doing an inspection, and you can see that all their topsoil started to erode into the curb. This becomes an issue because one, it's going to block that curb so it can cause flooding upstream of where that curb is going to. And even worse, it can get into your catch basins and then it can clog them up, and then you're in for a real treat because you're going to have to go and vac them out, and that costs money and time. So if you see something like this, it's pretty simple. You either have to repair it, modify it, or actually install something. So in this case, they had to put down some silt sock. A lot of this stuff a lot of these actions are really low cost, low time commitment. You can buy a roll of sock like this for 50 to 100 bucks, throw it down quick, takes you 5 minutes. The next question that you're going to have to answer on your form is all inlet protected properly, all your catch basins. This is another picture I took actually right down the street from my house. And it might be really hard to see, but you can see a little bit of that silt, the filter on the catch basin sticking out all the water. They simply didn't clean any of it out, and they had excessive rain, and it just plugged up and started to flood out the road. And you really want to keep an eye on things like this ahead of time, because more often than not, how do you think a general contractor is going to fix this? They're not going to come and back it out. They're going to go grab something sharp and pointy and just poke a hole in it, and all that sediment's going to go right into your catch basin. And then this one specifically went straight to a pond. So the actions that are going to be required for something like this is to clean, replace, or install the missing protection. Something like this. I'm sure many of you have seen something like this in the past. Number 6 is basically is the air free of fugitive dust. This might not seem like a huge issue if you see, I'm sure all of you have been into a construction area before and you've seen dust, but this actually becomes a really big problem, especially on larger construction sites that have sensitive environmental areas around. If you have constant dust getting kicked up into the air, it can choke out wetlands, it can add sediment. It's really one of those things that can be a problem over time. Or if you have different families that live in the area, there might be children that have asthma, and if there's dust in the air, it can cause a lot of issues. The action required is pretty simple. Just have to lay water down or apply dust control products. Generally speaking, people just throw water down in means like this. They just get a water tanker and it just sprays all over the place and lets the dirt down. Number 7 is the public right-of-way and curb line free of tracked soil and accumulation. You're going to see this a lot in larger construction sites where you might have a lot of dump trucks leaving the construction site going onto the public right-of-way. And more often than not, I'm sure all of you have seen dump trucks where they have dirt caked to the entire side of the truck, and it doesn't just stay on the truck when they drive away. It starts dropping off, goes in a curb line, and can cause flooding like you see in this picture. The action required, I'm not going to go through all these. Basically, it just says you need to have some type of means to get rid of that dirt on that construction equipment when it leaves. Some different examples of that is going to be simple clear gravel to make a pad basically, or you can get it's like textile pads as well. They're pretty expensive, so 9 times out of 10 you're going to see something like on the left. Or you can have these really fancy watering stations where they have to spray off all the dirt from their equipment before they leave. More often than not, you're not going to see something in the middle unless it's a really sensitive area with a really big project where you can't have any sediment leaving the construction site. Number 8 is, are all wetlands, lakes, streams, ditches, and storm sewers downstream of the site free of sediment? This is probably the most important one because it can have the serious complications when you get the DNR involved. So you can see on the left here, there's a giant sediment plume going into a lake. This is a huge issue because it can kill off fish, other invertebrates that are in the lake. And on the right, you can see that they have ditch checks. Those are those hay bales that you can kind of see. And the water's just running right over the top of them, so they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. The actions required for this is basically what were listed before. You either have to repair it or install it. And for something serious, you do need to contact the DNR to verify the extent of cleanup. So something like on the left, where you see this giant plume going into a lake, you would have to call the DNR and get them involved. Something that you might see to rectify these issues is on the left, there is actually a lake filter. So it basically keeps all the sediment to one section of the lake. This is something that's like a worst case scenario item that you're going to want to do because it still has sediment in the lake. You're still going to have to go through and clean all that up afterwards. So that's really to kind of contain something that's already an issue. Something that you'd want to do beforehand would be something like on the right, where you have a dewatering bag, they're called. So imagine that it's just a giant filter. So you just pump all your water from the site into this bag and it filters out all the water so it doesn't have any sediment in it. Number 9 is going to be is dewatering and or vehicle equipment washing stations being done in a manner that prevents erosion. So you're not going to see this at 9 out of 10 construction sites. Again, this is something that you're going to see at a larger construction site. The big thing with this question is if they have it, are they doing it properly? Who here thinks that this is being done properly in this picture? Just raise your hand. From what I can tell, I'm going to say no, because if you look at the bottom corner here, a lot of that water is just going to run off the side and it doesn't look like they have any type of control on the side there. And it actually looks like it's starting to erode underneath that actual structure. So that could be a potential hazard as well. If this is an issue, you basically just need to have them modify how they're currently doing it. Question 10, this is probably the one that gets the most kickback when we confront contractors about this issue. It is a requirement though from the DNR, is that all stockpiles that exist for longer than 7 days need to be stabilized. 7 days is not a very long time. And I kind of struggle with this one too. I've had excavators come running down the street at me swearing when I flag them for this because they don't really like it. I just tell them, I don't know what to tell you. I agree with you. But the idea behind this is that stockpiles like this specifically are dust magnets. So if it dries out, it's going to kick dust all over the place. And then if it's not dry and it rains, it's going to erode a bunch of sediment all over the place really quickly. There is a simple action that you can do to basically meet the DNR's needs on this. You can seed it out or install mat, mulch, or polymer, or cover it with a tarp. More often than not, you just see contractors seed it because it doesn't have to germinate within 7 days. They just need to actually seed it so that if it stays there longer, it actually has something to keep that erosion at bay. So more often than not, you'll see contractors and you kind of want to keep an eye on them because they might just take a bag of seed and just go like that and say, oh, I seeded it. So you want to make sure they actually seed it properly. And this is an example where if you have something that's a little bit more long-term, you might just want to tarp it. 11 is if all downstream channels from the project have any scouring or erosion. So this would be a perfect example of what scouring will look like in a ditch line. So you can see that the runoff is basically taking this really narrow path and eroding out all of the sediment in that area. This can be dangerous for if it's on the side of the road as well, because if you have this deep of scouring, it can basically get rid of the integrity of the road too. You could have washouts easier to as well. And again, a common theme for a lot of these fixes, you either have to install energy dissipation or outfalls. Ditch checks are the most common items, slope interrupters or on-site detention ponds so that you don't have water running into that ditch. And this is what a ditch check looks like. Basically what a ditch check does is just gives the water an opportunity to slow down. So instead of picking up all that speed over a long distance, it hits this ditch check, slows down, filters through that hay, then it can continue on. 12 is our good housekeeping practices being conducted at the site. So if you see excessive beer cans all over the place, litter, I gotta say the thing I see most common is beer cans just thrown all over the place. And if you have things like wetlands or a creek in the back, you don't want to have, quick trip hot sandwich wrappers flying all over the place or beer cans thrown into the woods. The action required for this is fairly obvious. You just have to dispose of your trash. The more important one too is have a concrete washout station. This is something that's missed a lot with a lot of construction sites where they'll be pouring their concrete and you'll just see all over the place hardened up concrete on the surface of the project site. That can be really dangerous when it comes to environmentally sensitive areas. And again, this is one where you do have to contact the DNR if it becomes an excessive issue. I've seen a site before where they didn't have the concrete washout stations and you literally saw a little stream of concrete going into a wetland. And that's when you have to kind of cover your bases and make sure that the DNR is involved. And you can see from this picture, if you have a garbage bin, that doesn't mean that you have free reign to fill it up to the top like that. It has to be underneath the lid technically, because if you get a strong storm and it starts blowing all that stuff around, it's not doing any good. Number 13 is the plan reflective of the current on-site operations. So this is again, an example of what you would see for an erosion control plan. They have silt fence all around the property. They show where the drainage is going to be flowing towards, and they also show you the stockpiles and where they're going to have their entrance. Now let's say that there is a yard drain in the back corner that they didn't note on their plan, and all of a sudden you go out there and there's a bunch of sediment going into that yard drain. You're going to need to make sure to go and have them revise this plan or at least install some type of BMP around that new facility that they weren't aware of. And we do see this quite often. This is one where I saw they had the silt fence around, but it wasn't quite good enough to keep the runoff from this yard drain. So it can be something as simple as putting a silt sock up around it. Number 14 is where construction has temporarily ceased and will not resume for more than 2 weeks, is everything stabilized. So basically, if you have a contractor that's not coming back for a month, you just need to make sure that they can just run off and then stabilize everything. This is an example that I found in a field where they had the silt sock down, but it's slowly eroded underneath that silt sock. So you can see it's scouring all the way out to where they had their sump pump outlet. So that's just one thing you have to kind of keep an eye on. So if a site isn't being currently constructed, if it still has the equipment there and it's still not completed, you still have to do your inspections. 15, we're almost done with the questions, I promise, and we'll get into the GIS side of things. 15 is all areas with final grade permanently vegetated and stabilized. So just because the project's done and they have the bare soil there and they say, hey, my home is built, we're done. That doesn't mean that you're done doing your inspections until you start seeing some type of grass seed coming up. They could have wild grasses too, or they could have alternatives to grass as well. We actually had one house where they had the entire backyard didn't have one blade of grass. It just had wild grasses and like bark and stuff like that, but they did account for their erosion control. So basically for this, you either need to get topsoil, install a mat or mulch, sod, or stone base. And the last question is, have temporary sediment controls been removed after everything has been completed? This is probably the one that's missed the most, because once the contractor is done, they get their paychecks, they're out of there. They don't care. I mean, I shouldn't say they don't care, but it's easy to forget about these things when you're kind of closing things up with someone's new home or a new business. So this is an example of one that I found that was in there for about a month. You can see grass is growing out of the catch basin protection. This isn't going to be doing any good for our infrastructure if it's not able to have water go through it. So action required would basically just be to remove the temporary practice or replace it if it's still needed. So it is the importance of doing these inspections is like, why do we really need to worry about this? First and foremost, it saves money. If you're going out and you're finding all these issues and you don't address them right away, you're going to end up having to back out your entire stormwater system. You're going to have to dredge ponds a lot sooner than you normally would have to. So first and foremost, it costs your municipality money. You also want to stop stormwater backups and flooding. I've seen numerous times where someone has done something to a culvert or hasn't protected one, and then all of a sudden it floods out the entire property upstream. So then you get into legal battles and legal consequences with who's responsible for that. If that culvert's in the right of way, is it the property owner? Is it the person who plugged it up? There is some negligence if you just kind of let things go as a municipality. So you do want to kind of keep on top of it. Another important one is it protects our environment. There's a lot of construction sites that happen near wetlands and floodplains in different areas that are important to basically naturally filter in our stormwater into the water table. And if you start plugging these areas up, you're going to start seeing more flooding in areas. This is important to urban and rural areas. I get a lot of questions because the town of Grand Chute's kind of split into two. We have a very urban area with a lot of commercial and industrial areas. And then you go 2 minutes to the north and it's all farm fields. So people think that, well, because I live in a farm field and I have a ditch, I don't really have to worry about this. It's probably even more important in rural areas because it takes one failure in a huge area where this can become a big issue. And it is also required. That is the number one thing. The DNR will come down on you if you do not do this. It is required by the operators, the people who are working on a project, and it is required by you as a municipality as well to check in on these things. So can anyone do an erosion control inspection? Technically, you could, but you must be certified by the Wisconsin DSPS. So that's the first step that you have to do. You could go out with one of your building inspectors and technically do one under the building, their building permit, but you're going to want to have someone that's certified. Anyone can become certified, and there's a ton of great classes out there, so you don't really need to worry about taking some advanced class. It must be approved by the DSPS. I always suggest taking the SECA's course. The good thing about their course is that you can do it virtually, so you don't have to go anywhere for multiple days. You take their test online, and then you also take the DSPS test right after you take their test. So it's basically a one-stop shop. You get it done in 2 days and you're certified. So a lot of you might be thinking, is this going to be a huge undertaking if you've never done one of these before? Generally speaking, the DNR requires that you have to conduct one of these every 2 weeks. Or if there's over 1/2 inch of rain. So 1/2 inch of rain might not seem like a lot, but that is a pretty substantial amount of rain. So that's not like every rainstorm event that you're going out there doing one of these inspections. It ends up averaging out to about 3 or 4 times a month. And what we've found from our inspection reports, it takes roughly 5 minutes to do an inspection. Some of them you can literally drive up to, poke your head out the window, see that everything's up, and you're right on the way. Other ones, you're trying to explain to contractors why they have to do this. They might not be very happy, but they average out to about 5 minutes a time. So what can you do to make some of these erosion control inspections easier? You can use the field guide, which I have a bunch of them up here. You guys are more than welcome to take one. You can also use ambientweather.com. This is a really nice website that I always like to push because they have, it's like the Facebook of weather stations, I guess is the best way to put it. You can access anyone's weather station and send alerts to yourself. So I actually, for the town, I actually access my neighbor's weather station because he's got a really nice one. So all you have to do is sign up for alerts on their weather station. And what we've done is we just picked like 4 random weather stations along with ours throughout the town. So if I get, and I made that alert so that if all these weather stations get over 1/2 inch of rain, then we have to go out and do one of our rain event inspections. And like I described before, where can you get a field guide? You can get them right up here at this table. And there's a lot of really good organizations. The Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance is one that's in the Fox Valley area. So if you're from that area, you can reach out to them. They have a lot of really great resources. There's organizations just like this throughout the entire state. So you just kind of need to reach out. And if you have additional questions, you can always reach out to the DNR as well. Wisconsin DSPS has a lot of great materials on this. You can reach out to me. I'm not like the best expert in this, but I can help you out a little bit. So now finally back to GIS. So how do we use GIS to do erosion control inspections? First, we use online maps and applications. We use these to get our field maps applications ready to go. We use ArcGIS dashboards. This is important for our end users. So we need to have our building inspectors review these. We need to have our Department of Public Works engineer review these as well. So they just access these dashboards basically that we put together. So what data is going to be needed before you start? First and foremost, you're going to need your base data. You're going to want to have your parcels, address points, and roadways. The reason you're going to want to have your parcels especially is because you can pull ownership from those parcels. So when you send out reports, you just have that ownership for that parcel right away without having to look it up. You're going to want to have your most up-to-date aerial photography if possible. It gets to be a little tricky when you have outdated aerial photography in something like a new subdivision and you're trying to guess like where this new road is or where this new pond is that they put in. It just gets to be really tricky. You're going to want to have environmentally sensitive areas like wetlands and floodplains. We've had it numerous times where people have submitted plans and they conveniently go right into a wetland. And we're like, you can't do that. And they just don't realize that they have that in their lot. You're also going to want to have easements. I don't know how many of you have been involved with mapping out easements, but generally speaking, there's going to be quite a few different ones in subdivisions or different commercial areas that you might be doing these inspections. Different easements have different requirements. So if you have a stormwater easement, Generally speaking, they're not going to be able to have a fence up in there or have permanent structures in these easements. You're also going to want to have your stormwater facilities if available. So if there's construction sites with yard drains, culverts and different things like that, you're going to want to note those when you're doing your inspections. The ones circled in red here, the base data and environmentally sensitive areas, are really the two big ones. If you can't get the aerial photography, the easements, or your stormwater facilities, it's not the end of the world, but generally you want to try and get those. This is what the application looks like. Basically, when we have a building permit submitted, it automatically drops a point to that parcel. That's why it's important to have your parcels, because they have to put a parcel number into their building permit. It pops a point down, and then we know that we need to conduct erosion control inspections at that location. We also utilize dynamic hyperlinks. So basically, we're pulling all the data from that parcel and pushing it into that long DNR form. Yep. Oh, sorry. Okay. So, yeah. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here since we don't have a ton of time. But other online applications, you're going to want to link your ambient weather alerts up to this application as well. Set up view layers with filters. So since you have to conduct these every 2 weeks, you can set up a view layer where you submitted your erosion control inspection so that it goes away after 2 weeks, basically, because you don't want them to stay in there forever. We want to make sure that we're using field maps now. Collector is no longer being supported. So if you have things in the collector, or if you're starting this up, do it in field maps. Utilize high accuracy GPS units as well if you have the ability to. We conduct all of our inspections via survey 123 with dynamic hyperlinks, equations, and relevant questions, and also our reports. This is what a dynamic hyperlink looks like. The area in purple is just opening up your survey. That's going to be unique to your survey. In the green as well. And then you can enter different things like field. Basically what we do for our erosion control inspections is we just use field dynamic hyperlinks to pull data from our parcel layer. You can also utilize equations. We just do very basic ones. So one of the questions on there is going to be the date that you conducted. So we just do simple now functions, and we do a lot of defaults. You're also going to want to have relevant questions. So I'm sure you all know, like going through 16 questions, if it's passing, you don't want it to hit yes 16 times. So what we do is we just ask the first question saying, did this site pass? If you hit yes, it marks everything yes. If you say no, it'll pull up these questions, and it'll only ask you for the action required if you hit no for that specific question. So if the erosion control plan isn't accessible and you hit no, it'll ask you how you're going to remedy it. And it won't ask you for anything else if that's the only thing that's missing. You're also going to want to have reports. So we use Survey 123 reports as an example of one that we send out to our contractors. And it's just pulling the data that you submit from Survey 123. Integramat's also another important tool to use. I'm going to kind of go through it really quickly. When you use Integramat, you have a trigger when your survey is submitted. By doing an erosion control inspection, it's going to create a report. We also have it so that if it fails, it gives me a push notification on my phone. It's going to pull that report with that HTTP call. Then it's going to send out specific emails to internal staff, to the contractors, and also to the DNR if it's something that we mark as a major failure. So that's a lot of information, and probably some of you are like, well, where do I start? I got QR codes up here that has the Excel for the survey in there. You can copy and paste it. It has basically everything you need to start this up. I have a bunch of copies of them, so you don't need to take a picture of it right now. But you can literally just copy and paste what I did then. And I'm going to skip ahead to the live demo. And you can see I got a little Homer theme going on here because live demos always go perfectly. So here is an example of what our erosion control inspection app looks like. This is what it looks like in the office and in the field. We have our expired inspections, where you can see we have single family homes, commercial, multifamily, and roadway projects. This is where we do our join layers. So if I were to click on this, you can see that it's filtered to 2 weeks. So these go away after 2 weeks because we want to make sure that we know that there is an inspection when they're out of date. And basically they're just 2 join layers. So if it passes, it turns green. If it fails, it turns red, and it automatically goes onto that point. And we also have our rain events right here that's linked to our ambient weather. So I put 2 examples here at the Kalahari. So I'll just put on the base imagery here. So let's say that the Kalahari is adding a giant water park over here, and we need to conduct erosion control inspections to make sure they're doing everything correctly. You can see we got it's a fake parcel number, address, and project type. I'm going to click this dynamic hyperlink to open up my survey 123. And you can see that the parcel ID is transferred over along with the address. And this is where we get into all of our questions where it asks for current temperature and other items like that. I'm going to skip that for the sake of time. But basically, when I submit that, it's going to turn red if it fails. So then I know that I have a failed site, green if it passes. And that gets linked up to our dashboard. So all of our internal staff can review these and see where we have failed sites. And one example of the Integromat is you can see that this is one that failed back on the 17th when we actually had warmer weather. It automatically sends out this report with everything that was in that inspection. So I can see that the parcel number was this, the address, even attaches the photo. So I can see, okay, crap, there's a foot of stone in my catch basin. I need to go and do something about this. That gets mailed out to our internal staff and to that contractor. I'm going to fly through some of these implementation items. So make sure when you're implementing a program like this that you involve all parties from the start. Don't be afraid to admit mistakes and start over and try something new. Some next steps that we're going to do is linking our building permits to our map directly. We have just started doing that right now, but it's kind of in its infancy. We're going to link email and phone contact numbers too, so that the contractors get texts on their phone, and also further link ambient weather. And we're also going to link our inspections to other field work as well. Some lessons learned is make sure that you rectify how to rectify failed sites. I've gone back and talked to contractors. 9 times out of 10, they're nice. The 1 time out of 10, they'll start swearing at you and chase you down the road, which I've had happen a few times. What to do if our municipal code doesn't meet DNR standards? What if the property owner doesn't fix issues? Can we issue stop work orders? How quick do we do those? And that's about it. I wanted to make sure to fly. Sorry, I had to fly through the last bit of that there because it is about that time. But does anyone have any questions about using GIS for erosion control inspections?
Just curious, I usually do septic and soil testing. Oh, dessert on perfect. So I usually do septic and soil testing, and we just started doing erosion control in our county to help out the town building inspectors. But what kind of unit are you using? Or are you just using a phone?
We're just using our phone usually, unless there is an issue. If there's an issue, we have a Trimble R12 unit that we take out. We don't generally have to do that. It's just with really problem areas that we'll start doing that, but
gotcha.
Yep. And if anyone has any need for field guides, make sure to come up here and grab one. And I also have the QR code for all my material.
Any more questions?
Do you have one in the chat? Okay. The one online, if anyone wants to stick around for the one online, you can. Do you plan to integrate the inspection forms into field maps rather than using a pass-through survey 123? We've dabbled into using smart forms for this, but generally speaking, we like to have that auto-generated report, which you don't get that with smart forms. So we need to have that report on file. So we don't plan on going away from survey 123. Yep, thanks. Yeah, no problem.